Today we're going to be discussing the history of 7 Days to Die and the new direction for my channel. The past few years have been very controversial as far as updates to the game go, so let's jump in. The recent history of 7 Days to Die updates, beginning particularly with Alpha 21, has seen a noticeable trend of player division and negative review spikes. Alpha 21 in July 2023 was the first update to see a significant spike in negative reviews, setting the tone for subsequent updates. There was a survival rebalance which removed the cans and the jars, which replaced them with the dew collector, and that was a major point of contention for the more immersion-focused survival players. There was a shift in progression with the introduction of the new crafting skills magazine system, which remains highly controversial to this day. While some players do enjoy it, a large segment of the core community dislikes the change. And this update also featured the changes to vehicle durability, which made vehicles largely just more annoying to deal with. It also introduced a lot of POI changes, particularly to tier 5 POIs, which often relied on cheap tricks or overwhelming zombie numbers that the game just couldn't handle, but this has been fixed in later patches, but the stealth changes to POIs have not. The 1.0 release brought another spike in negative reviews. The armor rework was highly controversial, and it replaced the old utility clothing system, which had way more pieces, with a 4-piece magical system. This shifted the balance towards more RPG style magical effects rather than survival utility that we had before. There was also a character overhaul which massively reduced the customization options of the player character, but we did get much higher fidelity characters as a result. We also saw the console re-release, which was a major benefit because a large player base finally got access to a modern build of 7 Days to Die. Then we had the 2.0 update, and the 2.0 update caused the most significant backlash, temporarily pushing the game's positive reviews to 40% on Steam. It introduced two widely panned features in the form of the progression system update, which replaced the existing weather and temperature system, which had been in the game for a decade and people largely were fine with a convoluted RPG style system where players received a damage timer upon entering a new biome, and it forced them to complete arbitrary biome tasks to unlock, and I'm not joking, a Boy Scout badge, which you had to get from the trader, which increased trader dependence heavily, which is another common critique of the game. The dynamic storm system was visually cool, but ultimately underwhelming and largely annoying. It forced players to leave the biome or shelter for extended periods, sometimes as long as 20 minutes, simply damaging them every few seconds if they went outside, with no preparation the players can take being able to avoid it. You just kinda had to leave. Most players I've seen and spoken to ended up disabling this feature entirely within a few hours, which is not great for the namesake of the 2.0 Storms Brewing update, is it? Especially since we waited a year to get a feature most of us just turned off. To make matters worse, 2.0 introduced highly criticized zombie types, the Plague Spitter, Frostclaw, Charge Zombies, and Infernal Zombies, the first two being viewed as tonally out of place, the latter two being considered widely as more unoriginal bullet sponges, and indeed, the Charge Zombies still have some pretty critical bugs to this day, where some of the zombies are doing twice as much damage for no particular reason. The Fun Pimps later addressed the controversy in their Town Hall stream, which largely worsened the negative spike in reviews due to verbal missteps, including comments which were widely interpreted as blaming players for delays. I say interpreted diplomatically. Since the 2.0 debacle, the Fun Pimps have increased communication, promising to fix many of the update's problems in the upcoming 2.5 patch, currently predicted for early December as of writing this video script. Key returning features include the old temperature system being expanded upon and returned to the game. Jars will be returning, which has been highly requested for survival immersion. There is the smell mechanic, which is a very old 7 Days to Die mechanic, but is being reintroduced anyway. And we're seeing visual reworks to the Plague Spitter and Frostclaw zombies to make them more visually coherent with the setting, and there's biome and storm improvements coming as well. The way I've been describing 2.5 is essentially just 2.0, but it was 6 months late, because this is what it should have been in the first place. If successful, 2.0 could be a major step toward restoring community goodwill. However, I think it's unrealistic to assume that this update will completely solve all community goodwill issues, especially considering the ongoing issues like the introduction of $10 cosmetic skins into a largely PvE, often single player or co-op game, and very aggressive promotional efforts for things like merch and Twitch drops during periods of major community instability, which have overall eroded trust and goodwill quite a bit more than one good update could fix, but it could be a very good step in the right direction. The fate of this game and its reputation leading into the much anticipated 3.0 Bandit update sits quite a bit in doubt. 7 Days to Die has been a game that has had major player spikes with every major update, but it noticeably returns to a pretty similar resting point between those updates. The key takeaway here being that 7 Days to Die is not a dead game, but it has experienced pretty static player counts and controversial updates. There is immense room for growth for this game, but there's also the considerable risk of it failing considerably with a few more bad updates like the last 3, and 2.5 will largely be our indicator on how that's gonna go. Now, to put any concerns to rest, no, I'm not quitting 7 Days to Die. In fact, while other creators played 2.0 for one playthrough and then backed off, I stayed making mods and making my own content, and indeed, as of late October, I moved away from long-form gameplay content, and that actually spiked my viewer count to 270,000 monthly unique users, one of the biggest viewer spikes in this channel's history, and it was achieved entirely outside of a player spike for 7 Days to Die, which is something I've never seen before. Usually I'm dependent on massive player spikes to see massive view spikes. This has not been the case recently because I've changed my content significantly. However, this success has led to a realization. I think I'm just getting too big for 7 Days to Die. I've hit the ceiling for what a channel focused exclusively on this one game can be. 270k monthly viewers is likely a considerable amount of the monthly players of this game. My growth is kind of tethered to the growth of this game itself, which, as discussed, is currently slow. My goal of hitting 100,000 subscribers will likely require an additional 12 million views if my calculations are correct. It took me 5 years to hit 26 million views with just 7 Days to Die content, which means getting 12 million with 7 Days to Die will be an agonizing crawl. My new direction is pretty clear. I have to expand. I will not be abandoning 7 Days to Die because of course that's what the first 26 million views came from, but I will be bringing in new blood from broader communities. Moving forward, particularly after the 2.5 player spike goes away, I will commit to a minimum of 25% weekly content being dedicated to broader survival game content. The goal is to become for survival games what I have been for 7 Days to Die. The shift has already begun. There's been successful videos on the channel already moving away from 7 Days to Die, particularly Long Dark and Vane. I have the path mapped out, and I'm committed to taking the difficult route of expansion because hitting 100k that way will make the journey to 200k exponentially easier than crawling to the 100,000 mark with 7 Days to Die and then beginning the monumental crawl to 200,000. Now, of course, some of you may point out that there are bigger 7 Days to Die channels than me, and that is correct, but you have to remember that a fair few of those are either people who've done this for 10 years to get to where they are, or they're people who have heavily relied on other game content as well. And I do not want to take 10 years to get to like 150k subscribers. So the path is obvious. I need to expand to other games as well. So how will this affect you? Well, there will still be weekly tips and tricks guides for 7 Days to Die. There will still be weekly discussion videos like tier lists, rankings, analyses, news, and criticisms, as that kind of content just keeps me sane, does well, and it's engaging for you guys. And I will of course be right there to cover all the major 7 Days to Die updates. The other videos every week though will be filled with either 7 Days to Die challenge videos, which I'll be continuing making in the background, or content on other survival games and survival game news. Long-form gameplay is largely discontinued on this channel as it was doing extremely poorly for the majority of 2025, but the content will live on in live streams. I will be testing 2 streams per week for the next 3 months, one 7 Days to Die stream and one other survival game stream. This will naturally provide long-form content with minimal editing, which many of you have been requesting anyway. Now, the last thing to cover in this video is my stance on my recent FunPimp sponsorship. I want to be perfectly clear. I have not signed any kind of deal to become a long-term creator with them, and I am not in their FunPimp's creator official program even after the sponsored video, and I will not be lessening my criticism of the game or the developers. I'll consider an offer to join their program if it allows me to get content to you guys sooner and allows me to get feedback to them more effectively from you guys. But if they ask me to change or censor anything about my content, it's just not gonna happen. I did not hold back in that sponsored video if you've seen it, and their feedback was genuinely encouraging. They said they appreciated the feedback and honesty, calling it superb and saying I went above and beyond. Kind of understand now, after the recent departures from the 7 Days Creator Program, what it takes to stay on their good side, and it's honestly not even related to critique of their game, and it's not even related to critique of the company, but rather you have to avoid a few specific statements when talking about the Fun Pimps. And one thing to note as well is that if you say anything unconstructive about them, let's say you called them stupid or lazy, the entire video you've made on them is discounted as simply hate. Even if you made a lot of very useful and good points in that video, they kind of just take that opportunity to dismiss the feedback. But I can abide by the very simple unwritten rules I've discovered for staying on the Fun Pimps good side. So if they want me to join the creator program, I'll do it for the benefit of giving them more feedback, because honestly I wouldn't get any more views or any noticeable amount more money from doing it. It would only be to relay feedback more effectively. I'm long past being someone who would benefit from gaining access to major updates 3 days earlier. 3 days are not going to make or break my channel, so I simply don't care. So I might join that program, but either way I'm not going to glaze them or their game. It'll be exactly the same as it was. Hopefully my feedback will be more effective in causing some change to the game if it's taken in good faith. So that's my declaration of intent for 2026 and everything I'm going to be doing to change the channel. Thank you for your continued support. If you're interested in the games I plan on covering, check out the video on screen right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.